رجل الأعمال الذي أسس 12 شركة وأحد المساهمين في مجلة فوربس سيخبرنا بحكايته التي يشاركنا بها على مسرح زايد توك. رحبوا معنا بمايك زيلر المعماري. Mike Zeller, the stage is yours. Welcome to the stage.
I'm Mike Zeller, an entrepreneur and author of The Genius Within. My obsession for decades has been unlocking the potential of myself and others, and I've found that if I know my genius or know the genius of my team, guess what? We have a capacity to flourish. If we play out of position, we will struggle and encounter more and more frustration because we are not in alignment with our wiring, with our gifting. At the end of the day, we've got to maximize our strengths and manage our weaknesses. How do we unleash the God-given capacity of you, your organizations, and even your nation? We are going to dive into the 5 fundamental premises of human genius and the 4 steps to unlocking the genius and potential of any individual. One of the greatest things that we see in countries that flourish, in organizations that flourish, and in people that flourish is they find themselves in exactly the right position more often than not. The greatness of an individual, the greatness of an organization, or even that of a nation is predicated upon whether or not those individuals collectively maximize their gifting, their human potential, and thus their genius. One of the biggest challenges, though, is the clues are scattered throughout our lives about our genius, about our gifting, about our potential, and until now there's not been a formula to gather the clues and bring them forth so that they pop like popcorn. The patterns need to pop so that you can see and make more effective decisions about your life, about your destiny, about your career, about your organization, or even about your country. As the Honorable Sheikh Mohammed Zayed has said, you are the real wealth, not the 3 million barrels of oil. You are the future of this nation's security and safety net. So you don't want to miss this session at the Zayed Talks. The world desperately needs your greatness. It begins now. I can't wait to dive in with you, and thank you for letting me serve you.
Hi guys. Well, I'm honored to be here for a lot of different reasons. March is a very pivotal month for me. Last March was one of the darkest moments of my life when I came home from a trip like I'm on right now, and my wife came home at about 9:30 at night on a Tuesday evening, and she had a suicide note ready for me. And that was a really dark moment and scary moment. Last year was a pretty intense moment for me as I was going through battle for her soul, battle for her life. And it reminded me of what I went through in 2018, which is in 2018, I experienced what I thought was the hardest thing I'd ever been through, where I went through a period of mistake or blow after blow, things going wrong. I don't know if you guys have ever had things in your life go wrong that seemed out of control, but I was in that season of life where setback after setback happened, and I ended up losing $1 million that year. And I had also endeavored to get married that year. I had a beautiful wedding planned in Florence, Italy, with my wife and 60 other friends, and it was a beautiful moment. But I also saw, in March that year, one of my core businesses disintegrated right before we got married. And it was a partnership split, and it was one of the most heartbreaking, challenging seasons in my life up until really last year. But you know, the hard things in life often are gifts. I like to think of a Boeing 737. Most of us have flown in airplanes, right? Well, if you ever think about the physics of how an airplane is lifted into the night sky carrying hundreds of passengers, what's it have to do? It has to face this invisible thing called resistance. And it has to face the resistance or the air at a fast enough speed, at enough trajectory, at enough of the right angle that it will force this invisible thing called air, will force an airplane off into the night sky carrying us. Well, the hard things in life are often those things that are our resistance. So I had to learn a lot of things the hard way. I don't know if anyone else here is stubborn like me, but I've learned a lot of things the hard way. But it started in 2018, it started causing me to pay attention to clues. What are the clues? Why was I very successful over here, but then why did I make a lot of mistakes over here? There was a lot of reasons for that. And I started paying attention almost to the extent I feel like the Sherlock Holmes of human genius, where I can recognize and see patterns and study how do I unlock my own genius, my own potential, but also unlock the potential of others. So one of my central premises is that extraordinary success is preceded by being in extraordinarily right circumstances, right positions, and that your gifts are best utilized when you can identify with a simple 4-step process, which we're going to go through here. One of the things I've appreciated about your country, what I've learned about your country thus far, this is my first time to the UAE, by the way, which it's been a beautiful trip so far. But I loved the spirit and the vision of the leaders of the country. Of Sheikh Zayed, the Honorable Sheikh Zayed that we are here in honor of, and then Sheikh Khalifa and Sheikh Mohammed as well. I love this quote from His late Highness Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed, may Allah have mercy upon him. He said, "The people are the ultimate objective and the aim of development, as well as the engine and the means that drive its efforts." So if people are the ultimate aim, then what if we are driven to maximize the potential of others? What if there was a process and a pathway to identify, hey, as I look at my children, as I look at my employees or my team, as I look at my own life and my trajectory, what if there's a pathway for me to gather the clues about my deepest area of gifting? So I feel like there's 3 main ingredients of unlocking human potential. There's identity. We're going to talk about the identity of this country for a second here in a moment. Genius. How do I decide and define and decipher what is my deepest area of genius? And then alignment. And it's true of individuals, companies, and nations, but identities can shift. Here's one of the craziest, coolest stories I've ever heard as I've learned about the UAE. In the early 1900s, this was a country of fishing and pearl diving and trade. Then in December 2nd, 1971, through the vision and leadership of the Honorable Sheikh Zayed and others, they formed a great country with a vision to become even greater, to create great things, right? And His Highness Sheikh Khalifa advanced the vision and identity even further. Rising up out of the Middle East, you've become arguably the greatest country in the Middle East, from what I can see as an American. But now His Highness Sheikh Khalifa, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan is forging a new national identity, the next level of identity on equality and renewable energy and cutting-edge innovation in all sectors. So as you look, one of the things that I see over and over in organizations and people and leaders and high achievers is that your identity precedes your destiny. If you think about it, when we're walking, when we're creating something or becoming something more, what we see in our mind's eye determines what we become, right? But sometimes if we have a low vision of what we can become, it handcuffs us. But fortunately, we're not trapped by an old identity. Your nation is an example of that. I'm an example of that. The identity of a person can change. The identity of an organization can change. The identity of a country can change. But identity sets the ceiling, and then genius shows you the right position, and then alignment helps you maximize the potential. So assuming your identity is healthy and matches the vision, how do you go about unlocking the genius or the gifting of people? The reality is we all have areas of genius, don't we? In areas where we're not so good, we must be ruthlessly honest about both. So let me do this little exercise. Unfortunately, most of us here do not have a notebook, so we're going to have to pretend like we're doing this exercise. But imagine you write out on a notebook with your dominant hand. For me, I'm right-handed, so I write out, "This presentation rocks." And then if I switch, I write it out with my non-dominant hand. It would look like chicken scratch, right? It would just be, it looked like a toddler or a 3-year-old wrote. But if you go back to your right hand or your dominant hand and take great care, you'll notice that it will look dramatically different. Because at the end of the day, if we're starting from our point of where we're closer to our mastery, we have a lot less farther to go to get to mastery. But if we start down here where we're not so good, right, it's going to take so much effort to just get to average. We're here because we don't want to be average. I don't want to be average. I want to be extraordinary at whatever I do. And I'm going to lay out a pathway for you to decipher the clues on how you could be your most extraordinary self. So here's another example. Just if I start out with my non-dominant hand, just to get to okay, that's going to take so much effort, so much painstaking labor. But if I start out with my natural gifts, it's going to take just a little bit of effort. Still a decent amount of effort, but a lot less to get to great. And that's where we want to be. And that's where part of the vision of the country is, right? To be great. One of my favorite skill sets or tools is the Gallup Strengths Finder. Has anyone taken the Gallup Strengths Finder? Anyone take personality tests? Do we have any personality test junkies in here? Maybe not. In America, we use them a lot. But when you take this test, it gives you 34 strengths and helps you see the sequence of where you're most naturally gifted and then where you also are not so good. And there's a 1 in 275,000 chance that you'll meet someone in the same top 5 as you, and 1 in 33 million that someone will have the same 5 in the same exact order. That's how unique you are. That's how unique I am. And if we can maximize and start as leaders, if we can start seeing with others their potential and a pathway to understand their potential. So, and by the way, these slides, if you guys want some of the slides, I'll text them to you or email them to you as well, because this is my mission. My mission and obsession is unlocking the potential of others. So, first few premises. Our lives have clues about our genius. I don't know if you notice, like I have a little 20-month-old daughter. We could see things about her at the beginning, even early, as she was born, she gets quiet when we go into big rooms. She gets quiet when she's around other people. Tells us she's most likely an introvert. So that tells us, hey, all right, we've got to understand and navigate this. She's very dominant. Her first word was no. At 7 months, she smacked her hands on the table when we were trying to give her food, and she said, no, 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 very emphatically. So that tells us that she's a very determined, opinionated lady. That gives us clues about her future, right? So we have clues scattered throughout our lives, but no one until now has given us a pathway to organize and distill and see how the clues pop, right? So second thing, formula for understanding human genius is a 4-step process, which I'm going to show you. Third, genius blockers, traumas, old identities, limiting beliefs, systemic discrimination, and disempowering stories or beliefs handcuff us. So when my wife was battling depression for 2.5 years, she came from a family of a lot of deep abuse. She is a 3-time suicide survivor before the age of 21. And I knew she had experienced a lot of abuse, but when she got pregnant, it triggered her into panic attacks 3 or 4 times a week, a deep battle of depression for 2.5 years that we literally just came out of within the last few months. Complex PTSD. I don't know if it's like she had been to war like 4 or 5 times and had suffered the worst things imaginable, because when our daughter would cry, it would literally trigger her back into her trauma as a young girl, where she was taking care of 3 or 4 small children as an 8 or 12-year-old. And it would send her body, her parasympathetic nervous system, back into that trauma. So we had to heal that to unlock her potential. We had to get through that. Fortunately, we figured out ways for ultimately what's considered incurable aspects of trauma. But then number 4, the highest performing organizations of the future, highest performing nations of the future, which, if I look at the UAE, you have such a bright future. But they will have the right people in the right places more often than not, much more than the average nations or average organizations or average leaders. So you can have X-ray vision. I'm going to walk you guys through the path to understand, how do I recognize people's genius? 5th, it's next to impossible to succeed at extraordinary levels in a misaligned position. How many of you guys have tried something and you just absolutely stunk at it? Right? It was because we're in a misaligned position sometimes. Sometimes we need to keep going and learn, but other times it's just not the right position for us. So I love this quote by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. It says, "You are the real wealth, not the 3 million barrels of oil. You are the future of this nation's security. and safety. We are in a good condition now, but we want to establish the vision for 50 years and beyond. That resonated with me. He has the vision. He recognizes that the people are the real wealth. So I'm going to walk you guys through. This is a pathway that I've seen over and over, and it's without fail. I've led 500 leaders through this process, and every single time someone goes through the full process, they elevate their clarity of their genius. They understand how to put themselves in the right position and how to lead their companies and their organizations into the right position. First thing is your unique talents. What if we could gather hundreds of pages of information about you or about your key leaders, about where you're most naturally gifted? Well, you can. I take people through 5 different personality tests. We'll talk more about that. But then you also look at your defining life experiences, those pivotal, meaning-making moments that help shape you and help, as a country, for example, help shape the country, right? Third thing, key relationships, the people that bring you life versus death. Have you ever been around people and you're like, man, I don't want to be around that guy or woman anymore. They bore the heck out of me. Or, I love being around that person. I feel something stirring in my spirit. Like I recognized a few years back, I was like, I have all these best-selling authors as friends. I hadn't written a book at the time. And I was like, I love being around these leaders and movement makers and thinkers. There's something there. And now I have 1 book done, another 2 books in the queue. Last thing, your values and passions. What do you stand for and what do you stand against? And what are you curious or passionate about? So we'll cover briefly through this. So the 4 steps, again, 5 different personality tests. You get 250 pages of insight. When I do the defined life experiences, you go through from your birth to now. And there's clues scattered throughout your life about who you are, what on earth you're made to do, and what gifts you have to offer to the world. Next one, key relationships. Again, who do you feel drawn to? Who do you already have a cluster of relationships with? Next one, values and passions. All right, I love Einstein's example, and also Sheikh Zayed. We're going to talk about him in a second. Einstein's curiosity drove him to understand how the world works, how physics work, right? How light and E equals mc squared, how that all came together because his curiosity drove him to become passionate about physics and understanding the world, which drove him to become one of the greatest physicists of all time, right? And then if you look, one of my favorite examples, from what I've learned about the Honorable Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, he was curious about what could happen if the 7 Emirates united to form a great country. That became his passion, to unite the 7 tribes. And that developed into his purpose to build a great country, which led to his life path. For 30 plus years, he was a great leader, right? He set the stage. His legacy still lives on. His spirit still lives on. And his identity and his talents supported that. So what about you? What are your curiosities? What's your passion? What's your life purpose, right? What if you could gain some clarity on that? I'll fly through these a little bit. Reggie Shetty, one of my clients that I work with, we went through the whole process we're talking about. He's got 350 employees, but we gave him a lens and a filter so he had x-ray vision. He could see his team at another level. What if you could see the people you lead, even your family, understand and appreciate their gifts and help them find their natural life path? So, in Rajesh's example, his communication elevated, his executives got more inspired, and his team got more inspired. Another one, Kristen Boss, she was just a hairstylist when we met. Now she's a best-selling author, an entrepreneur with a multi-million-dollar business. She's built real wealth for her company and her family because she stepped into her deepest area of genius. She did the hard work to figure it out, and she found confirmation that, one of the key quotes is desire. The root word for desire means sire, of the Father, of Allah, right? If we have a desire, a longing, a quest for something, it was given to us by God, by Allah, right? Trust it. Trust it, explore it, step into it. Don't allow yourself to be captivated by what I call the disease of small-itis. Like, I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. I can't do this. Who am I to do this, right? So here are some of the benefits of reverse engineering your genius. First thing is your flow state increases. How many of you guys are familiar with flow state? Flow state is where you're 500% more productive. It's where work becomes play. And people who experience flow state, they get all 6 of those neurochemical cocktails, where you're twice as likely to step in a flow state if you know your strengths and if you operate from your strengths. How many of you guys, you do something you're not so good at, you don't step into flow state, you step in a frustrated state. That's what happens to me. If I try and do something I'm not so good at, like my wife is a poet, I cannot write poetry. Not very well. If I try and write poetry, it's horrible. She will not let me sing to our daughter because I'm not a good singer. My wife's a great singer, but that's not my flow state, right? Second, your level of inspiration, natural drive increases dramatically. And then third, you experience a huge increase in happiness, fulfillment, and progress. All right? So those are some of the benefits. Love this quote from His Highness Sheikh Mohammed. He said, "I am certain from what I have witnessed from my simple interaction with bright minds and hopeful, optimistic faces that we are betting on the right people in the right generation for the future of the UAE." So I want to leave you guys with a few final questions. Are you operating from your deepest area of gifting right now? Are you effectively managing your weaknesses? What if you could actually see and understand your weaknesses at a whole nother level? What if you had X-ray vision? You could walk into a room and you could pick up on patterns. Like Omar, who's speaking here in a moment, he's brilliant and talented. Talking with him for 10 minutes yesterday. He left the room, and I said, Omar's probably really good at this. He's probably not so good at this, isn't he? And his wife nodded. She's like, how'd you know that? Because I can see patterns. I can recognize patterns, just not because I'm special, just because I have a filter. And what I'm offering to you guys is a filter that will allow you to have X-ray vision on leading your people, your company, your family in a different way that will align with their deepest area of genius. So, second, what would happen in your life if you were 50% clear on your gifts and weaknesses? Do you know your own gifts and weaknesses with razor sharp clarity? What if you could, right? Third, for leaders, what if central to the design of your organization and your hiring and your leadership, your communication was the understanding of the gifting of the people you lead? And what if you had that X-ray vision we're talking about? Fourth, for romantic relationships, it changed my marriage, knowing my wife's strengths, her knowing my strengths, knowing my weaknesses. Like I don't know about you guys, but we could get at it a little bit. We could fight a little bit. We have a little tension sometimes because we're so opposite. But now we can flirt and play and laugh about each other's differences and appreciate instead of being frustrated. We've traded our expectations for appreciation because we understand and appreciate each other's strengths. Fifth, what does your organizational culture need to be to unlock the genius of others? So, I don't know if we're having questions or not, but I've got a few free guides and different assets for you guys, and I'm here for the next 3 days to serve. So if I can be of service, WhatsApp me, there's my number. I'd love to meet you. I'd love to serve you. I'd love to help you unlock your genius or however I can serve. So that's what I have for my talk. Also, if you're interested in any, I have a workshop coming up, and then I also do VIP and one-on-one mentorship. So that's my email as well. I'll be checking and responding as much as possible over the next 24 hours, but I'd love to serve you guys, and I'm honored to be here. So thank you guys. All right.